Hey there, beginning Instagram Live. Lots of good things, and of course, lots of bad things happening. Of course, everybody is stressed. I think every single day, people's anxiety levels are going up, and it will be a question to see how far this goes. So, hey there, people are starting to join. So I was just saying that. Let me ask you guys this question: if on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is, whatever your state of well-being and happiness was before this crisis began, and 0 is you're totally miserable, where are you from 0 to 10 right now? And again, 10 is your level of happiness or your sense of well-being before the crisis began, and 0 would be you're totally miserable. So where would you say from on a scale of 0 to 10? So someone says a 5. Okay, so that means at the beginning of this crisis, you were a 10, and now you kind of have, because of the increased anxiety and uncertainty and so on, you're at a 5. Someone else says a 3. Someone else says a 7 or 8. I kind of feel like I'm probably a 6 or a 7. Like definitely Michael Deathless at an 8. I sort of feel that I'm not so much worried about the virus. I've known now about maybe about 12 people that I know specifically, like friends of mine, not just anecdotes. About 12 people I know have gotten coronavirus. One person was hospitalized for 4 days. All of them, 100% of them are now recovered. One person was close to 70 years old. Another person had many pre-existing conditions, and he was the one who was hospitalized for 4 days. But now he's home, and I spoke to him this morning, and he sounds great. And obviously, any virus, any disease, anything that can be considered an epidemic, anything that causes death is tragic. But at the same time, there's so many factors. You cannot say, okay, today we're going to stop all deaths from the common cold. It can't happen. You can't have a war against the common cold. It's going to keep happening. But when you're making policy, or when you're thinking about what should happen, or when you're even thinking about what you should do personally, you don't say to yourself, you don't focus on one number, which is the number of deaths this is going to cause. And if it causes any deaths, then no. Because we're a country, every country in the world has gone to war, has sent 18-year-old young men to war to get killed and shot at. So we're so panicked about one death in a country of 328 million people. Every single day in the United States, I think something like 7,500 people die from everything ranging from car accidents to cancer to other diseases to to the flu. And so now we have, call it 2,000 deaths in the U.S. from coronavirus. And again, those are 2,000 sad deaths. It's all tragic. But when you start thinking about policy and also what you should do personally, it's an inconsequential amount. So what are people actually worried about? The main thing that I see when people argue about this, the main thing that they say is this could keep doubling and doubling. There's two things people are worried about. The exponential growth. If it's one death now, and if it doubles every 2 days, then it's going to be 1 million deaths in 20 days. That's the math argument that people give about the number of deaths. That argument is, by the way, totally ridiculous for many reasons, which I can go over. And then also people are worried about the uncertainty in the economy. I worry about the uncertainty in the economy. And also, so someone just brought up the point, there's also the uncertainty in healthcare. Like, even if there's not a lot of deaths, will there be so many cases that are problematic that will overwhelm the healthcare system? So it's an interesting, it's an interesting dilemma. Like, what should we do? And the first thing I want to address is some. It's not quite positive news, but it's interesting data to look at. So if you look at a chart of Italy, and I posted one on Twitter, if you look at a chart of the new deaths per day in Italy, the number had gone down for 2 or 3 days in a row. Yesterday it went up a little, but it was still down from its peak. This is a really good sign that Italy might have passed the peak. And we can only hope. We'll have to keep an eye on the data. Italy is about 10 days ahead of us, so it sort of suggests that perhaps in the U.S. we might start to hit a peak in 10 days. Now, there's also a chance it could be less than 10 days. Why? And now some people will argue this, but arguably the U.S. has a healthier population in general than Italy, particularly as regards this virus. So for instance, the smoking rate in Italy is much higher than the smoking rate in the U.S. Pollution in Italy, believe it or not, is much higher than pollution in the U.S. In fact, that region, that Lombardy region, is probably the most polluted area of Italy. Also, here's something that's interesting. In Italy, and in many countries, there's something around 5 to 10. I think in Italy, there's 12 ICU beds per 100,000 people. In the U.S., there's 34 ICU beds per 100,000 people. So it's probably unlikely that the health system is going to be... No, so someone said the U.S. population is older. That is actually incorrect. The average or median age in Italy is 45. The average age in the U.S. is 36. Italy has a much older population than the U.S. And in fact, the average fatality from coronavirus in Italy is 79.5. By the way, life expectancy in Italy is 80. So it's unclear. Now, I saw some articles. It's unclear if all of the reported deaths in Italy from coronavirus come from coronavirus or come from one of the other pre-existing conditions. There's no way to really know. So if someone has the cold and a flu and then they die, what do they die of? It's unclear. So there's a lot of stuff in the numbers and the data that's very unclear. Another thing is, it seems like every time I see a prediction about number of cases, I'm still seeing in the media that up to 2 million people, there could be up to 2 million fatalities in the U.S. This is so ridiculous. I'll give you 2 statistics. One is, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of professional basketball players in the NBA have been tested positive for coronavirus. They tested everyone. There's 400 people in the NBA, 10, and they all have touched each other. They all have been exposed to the virus. 10 of the people in the NBA, 10 out of the 400, have tested positive, and it pretty much seems like all of them are going to be fine. And there's a lot of groups where it's suggested that something like 3% of the people exposed, if in a healthy group, tend to get the virus, and of that 3%, the fatality rate might be something like 0.5%. So the overall fatality rate across the population, this is why the fatality rate is so small in places like China, South Korea, Singapore, even Italy. As a percentage of the population, it's 1% of 1%. So it's 0.0001% of the population of Italy actually has been a fatality. So the actual fatality rate across the population in the U.S. is going to be really, really tiny. It's going to be probably better, although I hate to use the word, it's probably going to be a better number than the flu rate. So we just don't know yet, but that's where it seems. I'll give you another example. This is just an anecdotal example. But in Ohio was one of the first states to do a total lockdown. And they did a lockdown because the health director of Ohio, her name's Amy Acton, she said at the time, I think this was 2 weeks ago, she said there's probably already over 100,000 cases of coronavirus in Ohio. So that was 2 weeks ago. So we should have seen, if the fatality rate is truly 1% or 2%, we should have seen already, 1,000 deaths. A minimum, 1 to 4,000 deaths in Ohio already. Instead, how many deaths have we seen in these 2 weeks since she said that? We've seen 2 deaths. So again, every death's horrible. No one's questioning that. But it's interesting to show how off these predictions are. So thoughts on the stimulus package. So yesterday, finally, they passed the stimulus package. Here's the thing. So a couple things in the stimulus package that's interesting. there's both short-term stimulus, which is going to affect the economy immediately, and there's long-term stimulus, which is going to start affecting the economy in 6 months and will continue for about 18 months. So the stuff that's going to affect the economy immediately is they're going to send everybody a check. You know, if you're a family of 4, they're going to send you about $3,000, just a straight-out check, and you'll be able to spend it. Now, what can you spend it on if you're locked down? But that's another story. Second, they're doing all these loans to small businesses, to large businesses, and so on. And third, this is not in the package, but the Federal Reserve announced all of these. They're gonna buy trillions of dollars worth of bonds to keep the economy and banks afloat and keep everybody lending money to each other. The whole system, the whole economy, sort of thrives on debt. So the Federal Reserve is keeping that in motion. And what this means is, if we get out of this fast enough, if we stop the lockdown and then we actually go back to work, then the stimulus is going to be so enormous. Here's what's going to happen. Next quarter, we're going to see all this horrific data, 20% unemployment, 10% unemployment, whatever the number is. We're going to see numbers that are similar to the Great Depression. But then after that, in Q3, starting around August and September, you're gonna see so much stimulus happening in this economy that it's gonna be, you've never seen anything like it before. They've never done stimulus. The greatest stimulus that's ever happened in the economy was 2009, after the financial crisis. This is gonna be double or triple that stimulus. The surge in the economy, and it's going to last for at least a year. The surge you're going to feel you've never seen anything like it. The stock market's going to soar, sales are going to soar, employment's going to soar. Everyone who's losing their job now is going to get hired for something. And, I think the main thing I'm worried about, though, is will this lockdown last longer? Now, yesterday I suggested that maybe that he should end the lockdown as early as, if not this week, then by the end of next week. It looks like then later on in the evening, Trump announced that he's going to try to end the lockdown by Easter Sunday, which is the week after that. So I was sort of a week off on when he's planning on doing it, but he clearly, you cannot, the economy, again, is not a light switch that you could just turn off for 3 months and then turn it back on. Society and the economy are the same thing. People work, people eat, people have to get education and clothes and food for their children. So an economy is not something that can just be shut off while everyone stays at home. Everybody has to go to work. That's what a society is. So if you shut down the economy for 3 months, you've effectively shut down society, and it will be replaced by something much worse than what we left. So it won't be replaced. If this economy was shut down until September, hypothetically, it's not going to be replaced by capitalism. It's going to be replaced by something else. People, as someone says, people will die if the economy is shut down. There'll be suicides, there'll be homicides, and already our people, they've canceled all other sort of medical procedures. So you can't go to the dentist. You can't many people are not getting their cancer treatments or other sorts of treatments for chronic illnesses. So we're risking the lives of millions and millions of people right now by having this lockdown, and it's not clear that a lockdown works. South Korea didn't have a lockdown, Singapore didn't, Japan didn't, Taiwan didn't. They had aggressive social distancing, but that's it. Then they hit their peak, and then they came down. So, again, the details of the stimulus aren't as important as the fact that it's basically $6 to $10 trillion of stimulus. Larry Kudlow went on TV last night. He said it was $6 trillion. I actually think it's a bit more if you count all the interest rate cuts, and if you count the drop in the price of oil. It's more like a $10 trillion stimulus to the economy. And I think the data now is starting to get positive enough, at least what we're seeing out of Italy. If that lasts another couple of days, kind of a stabilization of the number of new deaths per day. Everyone keeps saying, oh, it's always exponential. But no, it's actually gone down or maybe stabilized. If we continue to see that, then I think the stock market right now starts to be a huge, enormous opportunity. So someone says, Sanchez Film says that with this stimulus, you're going to have a huge bubble of funny money. And that's correct. So the big problem that's going to happen, and I don't think it's going to happen within the next year, but it will happen, let's say around end of 2021 or 2022, you're going to see some sort of financial bubble and then a massive, massive crash. So for instance, after 9/11, there was huge stimulus in the economy because they wanted to, Bush was afraid that the economy was going to suffer because of 9/11. So all the interest rates got cut, everybody got a $1,000 check and so on. So what happened? There was a huge, huge bubble in the stock market. Then there was a huge bubble in housing. And then there was a huge bubble in, mortgage-backed derivatives. And then the economy crashed about, 6 or 7 years later. So yes, this kind of stimulus is hard for an economy to absorb. The first thing that happens is we'll absorb it and we'll all feel this feeling of, wow, I never had this much money before. All this stimulus is going to fuel everybody thinking that they're wealthier than they are. And then, I don't know whether it's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 6 years from now, eventually there has to be some sort of corrupt financial bubble. But that's then, this is now. Let's take advantage of the fact that the stimulus is going to happen now. So here's a couple things we know. We don't know this, but we think it looks like Italy data is starting to stabilize. And I would argue the US is in a better environment than Italy to weather this storm. So some people don't agree with me on that, but definitely Italy has a much older population than the US. There are a lot more smokers in Italy. There's a lot more pollution in Italy. By the way, there's less ICU beds per 100,000 people in Italy. So their healthcare system is just a mess compared to the US. Not that the US is perfect, but Italy is much worse. And so the fact that Italy is stabilizing now and we're 10 days behind Italy is a very strong positive indicator. Second, we do know that Trump is very interested in ending the lockdown and getting people back to work. Now, who knows if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but we do know that it's good for the economy, and if the economy is not reopened at some point, the entire system collapses. And we know that this stimulus package has been passed. So the combination of all these things, to me, it's all a positive indicator that not only things are going to get back to normal, it's kind of unclear that we even needed financial stimulus. But yet, I'll take it. If they're handing it out, I'll take it because I think there's going to be enormous, enormous opportunities. By the way, the stock market doesn't reflect what's actually been going on in the economy. So, so someone says the U.S. is much more obese and it's a major risk factor. Okay, U.S. is more obese. Italy has more smokers. Italy has an older population. Italy has more pollution, and Italy has less ICU beds per 100,000 people. So I don't know how you weigh these factors, but in general, it seems like Italy has had a tough time because of their aging population and these other factors. Whereas who knows if the U.S. will have a tougher time because of right now I think in the U.S. about 36% of people are considered obese, and in Italy it's about 20%. So there is a difference, and but there's huge differences in the other factors as well that are hurting Italy. So and by the way, I am optimistic, but it's not like I'm optimistic. It's not like I'm being stupidly optimistic. Like I'm looking at all of the factors involved. I'm keeping an eye on the data. I don't want to mess up on. I don't want to misspeak and say something's positive when it's not. So right. COVID's a respiratory disease. So if you have a population like Italy with many more smokers and with much more pollution, you're kind of in trouble. And if you have less ventilators and less ICU beds per 100,000 people, you're in trouble vis-a-vis the U.S. Now, if the data is starting to stabilize in Italy, which it strongly looks like, then that's an encouraging sign for the U.S., which is only 10 days behind Italy. Second, I do think it's really amazing how many people predicted nonstop exponential growth. Someone just called me an idiot on Twitter because, if something keeps doubling, it'll eventually be millions. What country has there been millions of cases, let alone deaths? And again, the Ohio was one of the first states to shut down, and I remember it was like 2 weeks ago, or a little over 2 weeks ago, the health director of Ohio, Amy Acton, said there probably was already 100,000 infected cases of coronavirus in Ohio at that moment. I think it was on March 10th that she said that. Well, if that was true, and if there's a 1% fatality rate, let alone a 4% fatality rate, which the media sometimes claims, there would be 1,000 deaths in Ohio by now. The deaths usually happen within those 2 weeks. So it's been over 2 weeks. And how many deaths have been Ohio? I believe the number is 2 right now. So it's not been 1,000. It's been, again, 0.2%, 0.02%. So that's a fact, right? So someone just said I had no facts to back it up. That's kind of a fact. So I don't understand why the media continues to make these unbelievably huge predictions. The predictions have not come true in any scenario at all, other than a pure mathematical scenario. In reality, none of these predictions have come true because we don't know the number of cases that are asymptomatic. We don't know the number of cases that get infected who are people who are exposed versus people who are infected. We do know some groups, like you have a group like the NBA, which has 400 people in it. They were all exposed, presumably. 10 people actually got it. No fatalities. So, okay, there's all these thoughts on the 5G conspiracies flying around. So everybody's asking, did 5G cause this? The fact that 5G is being introduced into the world, this new frequency. And the answer is no. The country that is most sophisticated with 5G is South Korea. They're the most sophisticated in the world with 5G. So South Korea and Singapore had the mildest versions of coronavirus. I don't know how many cases there were. There was 94 deaths, and now it's over in South Korea. So 5G has nothing to do with coronavirus. And even if break the train after... if we stop the lockdown and suddenly cases go up, that will be data to look at. But I think the way he's going to do the way he's going to stop the lockdown is he's not just going to say, okay, everything's open. What's going to happen is all businesses will open. Everybody under a certain age maybe will be able to go to work, and then a week later, another age group will be able to go to work, and then a week later, another age group. I think the elderly will probably still stay kind of semi-quarantined. I think certainly positive cases will be quarantined, plus their family, plus their close contacts. That's like a South Korea or Taiwan or Singapore sort of strategy. So I think what's going to happen is within a month, you're going to see the economy completely reopened. Everyone is more or less going to be back to work with some quarantining still among positive cases and the elderly. And then, by the way, what's going to happen? You're going to get your checks, and then you're going to get the stimulus is going to kick in, and the people are going to start hiring. And then suddenly we're going to see what companies have been doing amazingly well during this period. So Amazon and Walmart, they're hiring hundreds of thousands of new employees right now because their business is through the roof. How many people here have ordered more from Amazon than ever before? I know I ordered more from Amazon than I ever have before. And so here's another interesting industry. So I was calling up friends of mine who were CEOs in the marijuana industry. So all the marijuana stocks, and by the way, I don't own any marijuana stocks. I own maybe one stock. I don't really own stocks. So all these marijuana stocks have been crushed, and I called up a couple of CEOs. The marijuana business is going through the roof. Everyone's stockpiled on pot because, I don't know, I guess to reduce anxiety, so power to them. But the marijuana business has gone through the roof while their stocks have been crashing. So and again, I don't own any stocks. I'm not making any recommendations. I vaguely know what marijuana stocks are good, and you always have to be careful. But there's a marijuana REIT, IIPR, which owns a lot of real estate that you grow marijuana on. And so their stocks, I don't know what's happened to their stock. Maybe it was cut in half like most other stocks. But their business, and I haven't spoken to anyone there, but their business has probably been through the roof. So anyway, any questions? Oh, by the way, while I have you here, I have, if you go to my Instagram account and you look at my latest post, I'm doing a book giveaway, my first quarantine book giveaway, and I'm going to start doing a book giveaway every single month. And what I'll do is, if you go to my that post on Instagram and you post your favorite 3 books of the past couple months, then I'll put it all in a big hat. I'll shake up the hat. I'll pull out 6 people, and I'll give books away. So the books I'm giving away this month are Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, hilarious book, Food by Jim Gaffigan, Of course, Choose Yourself by me, which I think will be more necessary than ever. The War of Art, a great book about creativity by Stephen Pressfield. Maybe You Should Talk to Somebody by Lori Gottlieb. Tiny Beautiful Things, a beautiful advice book by Cheryl Strayed. And Mastery by Robert Greene. And the reason I include these books, so first off, Man's Search for Meaning is very interesting because Viktor Frankl, he conceived of that book when he was a prisoner in Auschwitz. His family had been killed, and he was worried every day that he was going to be killed, and he still managed to survive and then flourish afterwards because he always focused on asking himself, what is my meaning? What meaning do I have in life? And for some people, meaning might be they want to help people. For some people, meaning might be they want to be close to their family and be a good parent or a good friend. But whatever your meaning is, this book is really invaluable for kind of surviving tough situations. And Cheryl Strayed talks about this also in Tiny Beautiful Things. Now, Mastery by Robert Greene, this is going to be a really important book because there's going to be a new normal. We're not going to just go back to business as usual. Things are going to change. People are going to change their behavior. They're not going to necessarily go out to eat as much. They might not go to big crowded events as much. You're going to feel more comfortable saying no to invitations that involve travel or big gatherings or business meetings or whatever. So I think understanding how to master new skills, and by the way, who knows how many people are going to get fired. This week, we're going to see the largest week of unemployment increase in all of history, including the Depression. So a lot of people are going to have to switch careers, switch jobs. But maybe it might be an opportunity to pursue things you're interested in. And that's why reading about how to master new areas of life is going to be important. So I think the question feed has slowed down, but I'm not seeing new questions. I'll look on Twitter for questions as well. But again, I just want to stress that right now, one of the problems I'm dealing with right now is that every day I kind of feel a little bit more anxious than the day before. And again, it's not like I don't own stocks. I'm not worried about that. Of course, I don't want anybody in my family to get sick, and I care very much about my friends who are sick. But I feel like, just in general, like I survive the day, and then at night, there's always like a press conference or somebody, or there's new restrictions. I live in New York City, so it's considered the ground zero, the epicenter of this virus. There's all these new restrictions. So I do think that we're having a hard time as a society dealing with the anxiety of this, which is another reason why I'm kind of in favor of the lockdown ending sooner rather than later. Now, people are making this distinction. Oh, well, it's people who want the lockdown to be over. They care more about the stock market than lives. No, it's not that at all. I see if this lockdown lasts another 2 months, say, there's going to be over 10 million people or more unemployed. The average American only has $400 in the bank. How are people going to eat? How are people going to survive? How are people going to have a sense of meaning? You want the economy to function because more lives could be destroyed or lost. And our economy is sort of the pulse of the global economy. So that affects all 7 billion people on the planet. So again, I wouldn't make, if this was truly an exponential pandemic where you're seeing millions of people die, that's another story. But there's no evidence to suggest that we're going to have more than that we're going to even have more deaths as a country than happen every year from the flu. We'll probably have less deaths this year than we're seeing from the flu. So again, that's just a guess, but it's based on all of the data that we're seeing. Even Italy, a population of 60 million people right now, I don't know how many deaths there are. There's 2,000 deaths, something like that. I don't even know how many deaths there are, or 6,000 deaths. There's an inconsequential number of deaths versus the population of the country. It's not like 20% or 10% or even 2% of the country. It's like 1% of 1% or 1/10 of 1% of the country has died. And most of the people who have died in Italy, from 99% of the people who have died, have the average age is 79, 80 years old almost. So again, I'm not saying that's not horrible, but you don't shut down a $15 trillion economy that where 130 million lives work in that economy and depend on it, and the entire globe lives and dies on the basis of the U.S. economy. You just don't shut down an economy like that, because you're not going to be able to reopen it. So I think it's very smart right now. Put in this stimulus, reopen the economy, continue quarantining and social distancing, but keep an eye on the data. But right now, the data to me looks somewhat stabilizing. Italy was the scariest, and now it's starting to stabilize. And then all of the predictions from everybody, like again, I gave the example in Ohio. What was the question you asked, Tyler? Ask again. So, James, are there any stats on environmental improvements since COVID-19? Well, actually, that's very interesting. So the answer is yes. First off, in China, we saw a huge decrease in pollution over the Wuhan province, where it has all these factories. Second, even above New York City, we're seeing less pollution. But so the answer is yes, there's less pollution. You could argue coronavirus is good for the environment, but don't count on that lasting. As soon as the economy reopens, we'll probably get back to 70 or 80% of whatever pollution there was. In general, long-term policy has a bigger effect on pollution than a virus. So I wouldn't say less pollution is one of the positive benefits of this virus. There's definitely much more misery and suffering, as Elizabeth points out, from both the economic anxiety and the medical anxiety. I think the biggest issue here is not that you might get sick or someone you know might die. Again, I think we'll end up with very few people dying relative to the flu or relative to the population of the U.S., but it's the uncertainty that's driving everyone crazy. The human mind is not set up for uncertainty. There's all sorts of studies that it's uncertain, that uncertainty is actually worse for your anxiety than bad news. And there's a ton of studies on that. So someone asked, have we missed the bottom of the market? And my answer is, who cares? Nobody ever, only the lucky people get the bottom of the market. This market could bounce up to whatever the Dow is now, 20,000. This market could bounce up to 25,000, and you're still going to have huge opportunities. I mean, the marijuana stocks, for instance, some of them might have been hit by 70 or 80%, and yet the marijuana industry is actually booming right now. Amazon, I don't know, Amazon's like 33% down. Amazon sales are booming. Amazon has zero reason to be down at the moment, and yet so there's going to be opportunities for a long time after this. You don't have to buy on the way down. Buy on the way up. There's nothing wrong with, so Bernard Baruch is a world famous historical investor like 100 years ago. He always said, I always bought too late and sold too soon. And yet he made $100 million back in the early 1900s from investing. So don't worry about catching a bottom. Just because the market's going up doesn't mean you shouldn't buy. That's the wrong way to think. If something's a good company and it's a good value right now, you should buy it. And there are many good values right now. There wasn't any good values a month ago. Now there's enormous number of, like, almost every stock is a good value right now. So I missed some of the questions. Andrew, what was your question? And Tyler, what was your question? Choose yourself mug. Don't forget, by the way, I'll just remind you, don't forget to go on Instagram. My latest post, I'm giving away my favorite quarantine books to 6 winners of a contest. The instructions are on the Instagram page. There's no strings attached. You just have to put in what your favorite books are in the comments. Everybody should win these books. I'm going to do a book giveaway every month. I might even do more of them during this lockdown. And happy to answer any questions about anything. So what are your thoughts on the real estate market? So that's a great question. A lot of people have been wondering about the real estate market. I actually think the U.S. real estate market, even though the stock market's going to go up very quickly, I think it's going to take longer for the real estate market to go up. But that said, don't forget, let me explain to you how banks make money. It's very simple. Banks make money because how much interest do you get? You put money in your savings account, and the bank will give you like 0.05% interest on that. But they'll take that money in your savings account and they'll lend it to people who want to buy homes, and they'll charge 4 or 5%. And so they take the difference. That's how banks make money. So banks only survive if they lend money to homeowners. So I do think home ownership will come back, but I do think real estate first is going to go down a little bit more. For instance, who wants to move to New York City after this? New York City, everybody abandoned New York City because of this virus, and New York City is considered ground zero of this virus. So I don't know, a lot of areas might get hit still, or people are not going to be as anxious to spend huge amounts of money to own when they can use that money to invest in the stock market. They can use that money to invest in themselves by starting a business or learning new skills. Like, why would you put that in a house? So I definitely would not recommend buying any real estate unless the real estate market goes down a good 30 or 40%, but who knows? My thoughts on cryptocurrency. I know Bitcoin bounced from its lows when everybody was panic selling. My views are kind of similar to they always are, which is that eventually we're going to move to a more decentralized currency, but it's taking its time. Who do I want to interview that hasn't been on my podcast yet? There's so many people I want to interview. I wouldn't mind interviewing someone who was a president of the United States. That sounds interesting. But also, I was just watching a Bo Burnham comedy special, and I kind of want to interview Bo Burnham, such a creative guy. Black Swan theory. So Black Swan theory is a theory by Nassim Taleb, which is really brilliant. I highly recommend people read his book, The Black Swan. In fact, I'll include a Nassim Taleb book in my next book giveaway a month from now. My current book giveaway was just launched. You can find it on my last Instagram post. No strings attached. I'm giving away 6 or 7 of my favorite books during this quarantine. But, I forgot what. Oh, Black Swan theory is basically it's this theory that things that you don't expect, things that have a very low chance of happening, like an earthquake, will happen more than the basic statistics suggest they happen. So there's a lot of earthquakes that happen in the stock market. So for instance, coronavirus, there was a 1 in a million chance of this happening, and yet it happened and it brought down the stock market. So that's a black swan. So Nassim Taleb is always correct that you always have to anticipate that there's going to be some phenomenon that's going to hit the stock market that's going to crash it every once in a while. So this was an example. The financial crisis was an example. It's just like random things that sort of happen that you wouldn't expect that crash the stock market. So it's always good to have cash on hand to put into the stock market for moments like these. Like never use leverage because you never know if it's going to happen. So Nassim has been on my podcast, and one thing I talked about with Nassim Taleb, so he has a great book called Anti-Fragile. So a lot of people think that the key to success is resilience. So if bad things happen to you, you'll be resilient and you'll come back from it and you'll be successful. But he goes one step further. He says when something bad happens to you, you should be anti-fragile. You should actually come back stronger. So the more bad things that happen to you, the stronger you become. And I asked him, because I was worried about this. I've hardly ever gotten sick in my life. I haven't been to a doctor since I was a teenager. And I'm really afraid that if I get sick, I won't be anti-fragile and it'll just cave me in. Even though I've dealt with other stresses in my life, I'm really worried that I'm not anti-fragile enough. His advice was sort of to slightly poison myself every day to build up anti-fragility. But I think this whole lockdown and the anxiety from this whole lockdown, probably that was a good way to start making all of us a little bit more anti-fragile. Now that we've been through this, again, we have to not necessarily congratulate ourselves, which seems kind of stupid, but just take a moment to reflect that never before in the history of our species have we all been united around one goal, around one single purpose. This is the first time ever. 7 billion people are united around one single purpose, and so we're here for it. The human species has lasted for 200,000 years, and now this moment is so unique that everybody in the whole species is united behind this one goal. So again, it's tragic. Of course, people who are getting sick, people who are dying. It's very horrible. and I'm not trying to just look for the positives in something that's really negative, but you do have to kind of reflect that this is such an amazing time, literally, to be alive. And, here, I want to say also, a lot of people are saying, oh, write your book or work on a project or be creative. And even I've been saying it, but I realize I've kind of changed my mind on this a little bit. It's no big deal if you just binge watch Game of Thrones all day. Like, this is a very stressful event. And I do think being creative helps you get in flow and avoids that stress. Like, whenever I'm creative, I avoid, it reduces my stress levels. But heck, I've been rewatching the entire series of Breaking Bad, the entire series during this lockdown. So, and sometimes at the end of the day, I'll say to myself, oh man, I should have been more creative. I should have been more productive today. But the reality is, don't punish yourself. Like, it's hard enough right now. Do whatever you need to do to just be happy and survive. Now, maybe watching TV, you feel bad afterwards. Okay, maybe one day take a break. You know what I kind of took a break from today, or in the past 24 hours, is news. Because I've been so obsessed with like all the data and talking. I know so many, expert epidemiologists and immunologists and specialists on this, and I've been calling them all day and calling economists and getting the data and learning more about what to look at and what not to look at. And, I wanted to take a break from that. Like, you can't, the only skill I was learning was coronavirus skill, which is not an incredibly useful skill for me. So sometimes you just have to give yourself a break. Like, this lockdown is punishing enough. Don't punish yourself afterwards. Like, oh, I didn't interact enough with my kids, or I didn't work on my book today, or I didn't reach out to all these people and tell them I love them. Big fucking deal. Like, you have to sometimes just relax and rejuvenate and sleep. And anything that reduces your stress levels is going to be good for your immunity and good for surviving this period. The economy is going to surge once things start to settle down. We're all going to go back to work in April. Things are going to settle down. Yes, there will continue to be deaths and there will continue to be new cases, but it's not going to be as bad as anyone thinks. Again, I'm going to quote Amy Acton from over 2 weeks ago when she is the health director of Ohio, and she said when they shut down Ohio, I think on March 10th, so over 2 weeks ago, she said there were already 100,000 there were already 100,000 cases in Ohio. This is on March 10th. She said it. Well, if there were 100,000 cases by March 10th, then and if the fatality rate was anywhere close to what people are predicting, like 1%, 2%, 3%, we would have seen 1,000 deaths or 2,000 deaths already. But we've only seen 2 deaths in Ohio. So where's all the predictions? All the predictions are wrong. The fatality rate is probably lower than the flu fatality rate. Another example, we don't know how many people get infected who are exposed. So in the NBA is a very specific group, but everybody in the NBA was exposed. And it's about 400 people, all exposed, all have taken tests. 10 people have coronavirus. They're all going to recover. So out of 400 people, only 2.5% of exposed people actually got infected, and it's a small group now, but there's going to be 0 fatalities. So if only 2.5% of the United States come down with the virus, it's about 7 million people, and less than, now they're saying there could be the fatality rate of actual cases with symptoms could be as low as 0.5%. You're talking about a fatality rate much less than even the seasonal flu fatality rate. And I'm not making these numbers up. I'm not trying to be optimistic. This is the actual facts, statistics. And so what you're going to end up seeing is top situation. I think this is even too high, but I would say the top is probably 40,000 fatalities just based on the math we're seeing. And if you look at other countries, it's probably much lower than that even. So and flu deaths is about 60, 70,000, something like that, or even much higher. Maybe it's like 200,000. I don't know. But and don't forget, there's people who are dying from other diseases because they're not getting treated in hospitals right now because there's no medical procedures happening in hospitals other than coronavirus. So and with the economy shut down, there's going to be deaths from that. So there's going to be suicides, homicides, all of these things go up in a bad economy. So again, I'm thankful that the economy will probably be opening up in early April, as I was suggesting yesterday, and then the president started suggesting later in the evening last night. And then the financial stimulus got passed. Again, this is double or triple the stimulus of any stimulus ever before in U.S. history. You're going to start to see the effects of that pretty quickly, but particularly starting in August. I can't even imagine, we've never experienced this before, I can't even imagine the kind of surge in the economy that we're going to see. But everybody should be extremely optimistic about what's going to happen in the economy towards the end of this year and then in 2021. I'm worried it'll create a bubble in 2022 or 2023, but I don't give a shit. I'm happy for the stimulus right now, even though I think they overdid it. I don't think we needed this much stimulus. I do think it'll be good for all of us to take advantage of it, and then be careful of any bubbles that start to result. So, someone says, remember Brexit? Oh, and Victoria is asking about comedy clubs. Sadly, I think comedy clubs are practically all out of business at the moment. So nobody's been, every comedy club that I know of probably had $0 in the bank to be able to weather this. But we'll see with this new stimulus if it's going to be easy to get loans and stuff to keep small businesses alive. Dr. Chris DiStefano is recommending witch hazel to combat COVID. I would say, since he is a professional doctor, to do whatever he recommends. But I also, by the way, there's a lot more evidence. People yesterday were sort of trashing chloroquine, which is a very powerful anti-malaria drug, and the more powerful version of it is hydroxychloroquine. Even someone from the White House has said, one of the health officials at the White House has said that they're very much looking forward to testing it and using it and making it more available to patients. I think this is going to be a very positive result for, if not this season of the virus, but future seasons of the virus. Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine combined with something called a Z-Pak, I think there's a lot of good evidence that this is, if not a cure, at least is very good. But of course, don't take it without medical supervision. But so I think there's so many positive results. One is we definitely see the data starting to stabilize in Italy. Hopefully that continues. The president has said the lockdown is going to end in early April. That is a huge, huge thing for the health of this country. Again, there's going to continue to be sensationalist headlines. There's going to continue to be more deaths. There's going to continue to be more cases. But I do think all the steps we're taking now are stabilizing. The flattening the curve that's happening is going to allow the healthcare system to handle the number of cases. The number of cases are going to be much lower than people think. Again, you look at, the predictions that were made 2 or 3 weeks ago versus the reality. There's a huge gap. 0 predictions from 3 weeks ago have come true now. There hasn't been hundreds of thousands of cases by now. There hasn't been tens of thousands of deaths. I'll say it for the third time. In Ohio, they predicted, the government had predicted 100,000 cases already on March 10th. If that was the case, you would have seen at least between 500 and 4,000 deaths by now in Ohio. There's been 2 deaths. So none of the predictions are working. So, I think whether, Trump, Cuomo, a lot of people have been partisan throughout this. Like everyone's saying, oh, the Democrats were stopping the stimulus, or Trump didn't do this, X, Y, and Z. No country except for the Asian countries were really prepared for this. So if you say the government wasn't prepared, you got to blame both the Democrats and the Republicans. The CDC knew ever since SARS that a pandemic could eventually happen. That SARS was in 2003, and everyone was scared. Why didn't we prepare in 2003? Why didn't Bush prepare? Why didn't Obama prepare? Why didn't Trump prepare? Who knows? There's no reason. Why didn't England prepare? Why didn't Germany prepare? There's no reason. The blame game is over. I'm grateful that there's some bipartisan work. We saw this stimulus package passed. I'm grateful people like Andrew Cuomo and Donald Trump are getting along to help things. So hopefully this will create a more bipartisan environment. I think Trump has done actually everything he can. He got Private industry is making ventilators. People are 3D printing ventilators and face masks. So that the contributions of private industry has been great. And I also think, the passing of the stimulus package, I think it's probably too big, but, we'll probably see massive problems 3 or 4 years from now. But at the moment, I'm not going to turn down money that's going to go straight into all of our pockets. We're going to feel the effects of this surge so much. The only advice I would give you is in 2022, maybe figure out how to diversify just in case there's inflation or a bubble. But that's years from now. So startups are going to benefit. There's going to be so much more money available for startups. Small businesses are going to get loans. I'm involved in many small businesses that are hopefully going to get loans from the government at very cheap interest rates. And everybody in the country is going to get a check for, if you're a family of 4, you're going to get a check for $3,000. Don't forget, here's an economics lesson. Here's an important economics lesson. Every dollar of stimulus doesn't just hit the economy with $1. I'll explain. If you have $1 and you buy a donut, you just spent $1. Now, if the donut guy goes outside and buys a newspaper, $1 was used to buy $2 worth of things in the economy. So every $1 probably has a $5 effect on the economy. So think about trillions of dollars in stimulus and what that's going to do to a $15 trillion economy. It's going to maybe double the size of the economy. I'm almost scared there's too much stimulus. That's going to be the problem. But in the short run, everything's going to surge. The stock market's going to surge. Small startups going to surge. If you have investments that are in private companies, or if you want to do a startup, now's the time to start your startup. I want to show you something. So there are many companies that start in a recession, and I'll find a list for you right now. Hold on one second. Hold on. Let me see. Oh, I can't. I might not be able to find the list. I can't find the list. But many companies have started in a recession. Uber started in a recession. Microsoft started in a recession. Apple started in a recession. Hewlett Packard started in a recession. IBM started in a recession. Don't think that just because there was a recession that's bad for the economy. There's going to be the worst quarter in economic history, even more than the Depression, next quarter. That's when we're going to see the data from right now. It's going to be horrible. Nobody cares anymore because this surge is going to be, it's going to be like a tsunami of cash that's coming into the economy. So everything is going to be worth more in a year than it is now. So I'm not saying buy the stock market today. Maybe it's even better. Use your money to invest in yourself and start a business. And, maybe in a future IG Live, I'll talk about what I think are the best small and medium-sized businesses to start, or the best side hustles to start. Because there's so many people got unemployed last week. I think people aren't going to be eager to just go back to work if they just got laid off without severance by their bosses. So there's going to be a lot more people interested in doing their side hustle or doing their own business so that they can buffer themselves against being laid off. So Nassim Taleb again, Nassim Taleb is one of my favorite thinkers out there. Nassim Taleb said the 3 most addictive things are heroin, carbs, and a stable salary. And trust me, I've been addicted to 2 out of those 3, and you don't want to have an addiction like that. So a stable salary, you get addicted to it, and then boom, you actually make much more money with a more volatile salary. People get paid to take risk, and in our society, not having a stable salary is viewed as risky, so you get paid money for that. So you might not always make money. I've gone years without making money sometimes, and then suddenly you have a huge burst of money that could be even generational. During this time, a friend of mine, just in the past week, so in the middle of this whole global lockdown, a friend of mine runs an online learning company. And by the way, that's an industry that's going to boom. If you could find something in the online learning space, that's going to be huge. But a friend of mine in the online learning space, and I was a very, very tiny investor in it, this friend of mine, he sold his company for $250 million a week ago. So that was during this lockdown. So he's made generational wealth during this lockdown. And I think that trend in online... By the way, the whole scam of college is over, because we all just realized, why was I paying $70,000 a year for college when I could just learn at home? And oh my gosh, there are so many better online courses than there are college courses. So I think college is going to move to a subscription model instead of a degree model. And I think also we're going to start valuing and maybe even accrediting online courses, like courses from Coursera or LinkedIn Learning or Teachable or Highbrow or wherever. And I don't know, I think we're going to move into a great new world where there's going to be more research and focus on robotics. By the way, robots have been disinfecting all the surfaces. Robots have been helping doctors so that doctors don't have to have close contact with infectious patients. And then drones have been helping deliveries. So there's going to be more research on drones. So drones are going to go up. Marijuana, that business has surged. Even though all the stocks collapsed, the marijuana industry surged this past month. Amazon surged this past month, even though the stock collapsed. So don't worry about not finding opportunities. There are huge opportunities in the stock market, but even better opportunities to start your own company. Now, before this is over, I don't want you to forget, I'm just no strings attached. I'm giving away 6 or 7 of my favorite quarantine books. If you go to my latest post on Instagram, I give the instructions. It's just share your own favorite books, and then I'll put all the names of people who comment on that post, put them all in a hat. I'll pull out a bunch of names, and I'll send out my 6 or 7 favorite books to everyone. No strings attached at all. Make sure I can DM you. That's the only strings. I have to be able to message you some way, so I have to be able to message you across Instagram if you win. But I'm giving away Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, Mastery by Robert Greene, Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed, Food by Jim Gaffigan, Choose Yourself by James Altucher, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. I'm giving away those books. I'm going to give them away to 6 people six of the people who comment with their favorite books on my latest Instagram post. And that's how. And then you have to let me be able to DM you so I can inform you if you win or not. I'm going to do a giveaway like that at least every month, if not more. If the quarantine goes on, I'll do it more. And international people can win as well. As long as I can send it to you via Amazon, you can win. If I can't send it to you via Amazon, I don't know what to do. But anyway, thanks so much. I'm going to do this IG Live every day until these lockdowns stop and we can all get back to work. But again, I'll just summarize. Everybody who was saying 1 million deaths, 2 million deaths, I mean, even the New York Times was saying 2 million deaths. It's just a lie. Nowhere close to that has happened in any other country. China has a population of 1.3 billion. They did not lock down the whole country, and they only had 3,000 deaths. Or maybe they were lying. Maybe they had 50,000 deaths, 100,000 deaths. Still a small percentage of the population. And it's a horrible healthcare system there. And Italy, they're starting to stabilize. That's good news. But very few deaths relative to the population. We're going to stabilize as well, and we're going to have very few deaths. We're going to have much fewer deaths than from the flu, and everyone's going to be embarrassed that they predicted 2 million when the result was only 10,000, 20,000, or 30,000. And it's a good thing that we're stopping the lockdown. It sounds like they're going to do it in similar ways to what I was predicting yesterday. I don't claim to be a good predictor, but they almost are describing exactly what I think should happen, which is in stages reduce the lockdown and bring businesses back to work. And then we'll stop being as anxious. Like, I'm anxious. It's not pleasant hanging out with my kids all day long. Like, I like to get back to work. And finally, don't give yourself a hard time if you're unproductive. This situation's hard enough. Everyone's telling me, oh, you got to be productive. You got to be productive. Shut up. I'll be productive if I want to be, and I'm just going to binge watch Breaking Bad if I want to. I don't need anyone else telling me what to do. I don't need a homework assignment during the biggest lockdown in world history. So anyway, sign up for my book giveaway, or not sign up, but check out my book giveaway and share your own favorite books. And I'm giving away a bunch of books on my latest Instagram post. Check it out. I'll be doing that every month, and I'll be back here tomorrow, 2 p.m. Thanks for showing up. Bye.